Welcome, everybody, to the show. It is the Counterclipping stream for Monday, August 22nd, 2022. This is Counterclipping stream number 87. After last week's disastrous cocktail experience, we are back to single malt scotch. This is, again, the Singleton of Glendullan, bottled at 40%, which is a little low, so there's no water in it, but it's highly drinkable anyway. We are clipping 1813, Napoleon's Nemesis, from the finest name in simulation gaming, Europa Simulazione, which is just a fantastic Italian name. So this is the only game I have from them, actually, and it looks pretty good. It is one in a series. There's supposed to be more at some point. Right now, there were two. The other one is, I believe, just called 1812, The Invasion of Russia. So very good. Looking games so far. I've been reading the rules. It is a one mapper, comes in a folio, which is a little bit of an unusual format, but there's a lot of counters. They're bigger counters, but there's two full sheets of counters here, so it does not feel like an exceptionally small game. Map is extremely attractive. I hope to have some video for it at some point. Our topic tonight is wargaming between the big wars of the U.S. Civil War and World War I. There's a lot of wars in that period, and we will talk about at least some of those that are better covered by war games, as well as mentioning kind of a bunch that are like not covered at all or aren't covered very much. Really, and we'll get into that. So gaming news, what's up with gaming news? We have a GMT update. We'll talk about that in a moment. But we also have, we are done with this round of Pacific War, having wrapped up the Guadalcanal campaign with a Japanese victory, but we also learned we were doing some stuff wrong, and that certainly made a huge difference because the U.S. Marine Corps was lying at the bottom of the Coral Sea. So we will talk about that in the upcoming. This is not going to come out all that soon, I caution you, because there's at least one other Pacific War play project that needs to happen first. But and we'll talk about that in a future episode. But there will be a full review of Pacific War coming. I don't do a lot of reviews, mostly because it's a pain in the ass, and but also mostly because, well, additionally, because I feel like you need to have played quite a lot of a game to give it a good review. And, I don't get to play all the games that come out. But this one, at this point, we put about 60 hours into, and we're not done. So before we go any further, let us get started by saying hello to John C. from the sunny, not Philippines. Daniel Barney, Joe Okabayashi, Hissy Cat Studios, congratulations. Charles Latorra, Dale Brady, Ed Holtzman, Strelnikov, Joe Perez, Andrew Franca, Fast Hines, Carl Creeder from the Wargame Bootcamp, Stephen Roberts, John Clark, William Bird, Iggy Crichtal, Lee Grant, Daniel Silverthorne, Jeff Beeler, Findle70, Chet Bell, Jason W. Stigler is in the house, James Whitmer, Jeff Anderson, Christopher Prest, Matt Davidson, Jeffrey Wesovich, Henry Sikorsky, John Stanley, Kevin Paulson, welcome back to the stream. Abraxas MF, Dirk Plexiglass, also welcome back. The legend Fucko is in the house. Chad Kennedy, Scott Bell, John Madison, Brant from the Armchair Dragoons is here. William Aarons, Vince Ree, Andre Ford. I don't recognize your name, Andre. Thanks for stopping by. The Command Tent, Reese Johnson, whose name I may be pronouncing correctly. Bill Thornton and Brian Foley. And Doug Sunset is back. Thanks, Doug, for coming back. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on tonight. So let me get to the big thing that is in the way before I can talk about anything else, which is the GMT update. And that is busted. So let's fix that. Okay, here we go. So GMT update was released a few days ago. There is some news. So let's go through it. Once again, as usual, let me mention that if you're enjoying the show, want to support the channel, please do subscribe, thumbs up the video. Super chats are on, super stickers are on. Those are much appreciated ways, not only to support the channel, but to highlight your comments so that I don't miss it, which is a thing that does occasionally happen because we have a lot of people typically here. So the GMT update, once again, as usual, if you want to read the whole thing, go to the GMT website and read the whole thing. We're not doing that. We're hitting the highlights with a concentration on new and upcoming games. So there is Labyrinth War on Terror coming to iOS and Android. I do have the PC app for it. We're calling them apps now. We used to call them programs, but now calling them apps. But I have that on Steam for the PC, and it's very good. I've played it a few times. Fields of Fire, Bulge AAR, so read that if you're into Fields of Fire. Vassal modules have been updated for Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe, which I still don't have. We'll maybe talk about that at some point. We have 2 new P500 items, so let me blow these open so that we can talk briefly about them. We have a box back sneak peek for Skies Above Britain, which looks real interesting. And Tanto Manta. And I think the cover of Tanto Manta has also been announced. I'm not sure if it's in this post or not. I thought it came separately. Tanto Manta is a thematic prequel to games like Here I Stand and Virgin Queen. People who enjoyed those should maybe think about looking at this. It does look pretty interesting. It is the rise of Ferdinand and Isabella from 1470 to 1516, the height of the Age of Discovery, blah, 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 blah. So Here I Stand is a fabulous game. Admittedly difficult to get played because it is a game that doesn't play nicely with less than 6 people, or as nicely at least. Feel free to argue with that, but that's my position. It's an amazing game at 6 players. It's okay at 3, and I haven't played the 2-player version. So this, like Version Queen, this may be less sensitive to that. GMT1 updates, a whole bunch of new bots and other stuff coming out for stuff. Playtesters wanted. Fields of Fire Bulge campaign is coming. We'll talk about that. New Vassal modules. 4, Commands and Colors, Napoleonics, Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe, Dominant Species, Flashpoint, South China Sea, and Almoravid. This is Almoravid 2. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know if we have Almoravid 2 coming. That would be okay. We could do that. I mean, you could do more Reconquista stuff. That would be fine. All right. So there are some interviews. There's looks like Dan talked to Mark Herman. I might have missed that somehow, unless this is the one where he was on with both of us. That's possible. In which case I'm mortally offended, GMT. Thank you very much. I don't know. We'll find out. So there's new merch. Yay. They're pretty nice looking sweatshirts, though, I got to say. All right. So P500 editions. There is a reprint of Falling Sky, which, it's a coin game. It was out of print for a little while. It is, these games are going to stay in print more or less continuously. Iron Storm is the next one. It is the First World War. The designer is Edgar Fenollar, whose name, again, don't quote me on that. And this is a one-sitting First World War game with not a whole lot of there's a lot of information here, and this pretty attractive looking point-to-point map. So for those in the market for a point-to-point World War I game that you could play in, it says what the play time is, 3 to 5 hours. You might want to look at this. Maybe this is less complicated than Paths of Glory. Really fast Paths of Glory players could play Paths of Glory in that amount of time too, but you kind of do have to be pretty fast and not just even know the rules. Paths of Glory normally plays a little slower than that. So this looks like it plays faster. Cards look nice, blah, blah, blah. Whole bunch of stuff. This is pre-orderable for $55, which ain't bad. The one that excited me is American Revolution Tri-Pack number 2, covering Monmouth, Germantown, and Newtown. And then bundled with Newtown was a second battle, Orsini, I forget how you say that. But there's 4 battles in here in the very well-regarded Battles of the American Revolution series. This is a Mark Miklos series. These are supposed to be very good. I've got the first Tri-Pack. It's great value. Haven't had a chance to get it to the table yet. So this looks good. I did pre-order this for $50. You're going to get, I'm not sure if it says you get a 3-inch box, but they're going to have a hell of a time fitting 2 mounted maps into a 2-inch box. So I assume we're getting at least a 3-inch box with this thing. And, very high quality components as usual. So I was pretty excited by this thing. Recent P500 editions. I think I did order finally Cuius Regio. This is the 30 Years War game that they've had on pre-order for a little bit now. And with for some reason, they're not showing the map here, or at least I'm missing it if they are. It's a really, really attractive map. I I'm gonna mangle this. I'm gonna call this Zheng He, which is not the correct Chinese pronunciation, but it's a David Thompson, Jeff Engelstein game, solitaire game on the voyages of the famed Chinese admiral, and it looks quite interesting as well. So, and the whole, a whole bunch of other stuff. So, skipping down, then new P500s on the horizon. It's a game with an Egyptian theme from the Napoleonic period. I could be super duper interested in this. This is, I've just finished the Age of Revolution podcast, rather extensive treatment of Napoleon's adventure in Egypt, and was more interesting than I expected it to be. So I am provisionally interested in a game on that topic, depending on what it looks like. A new smaller box game for GBACW players. Not quite sure what that means, considering that the last two games released for GBACW have been giant value monsters. So, something smaller than that, whatever they want to do from that series, as far as I'm concerned, I'll be happy to buy. Modern tactical battle games with a combined armed emphasis. That's not enough to attract me right there. And a new game in the Levian campaign series, which I'm sure will be shocking news. You will be stunned that there will be a new Levian campaign game in the works. We've got some convention information, including Historic Kansas City Fest, which I believe happened last weekend, actually. And the San Diego Historical Board Game Convention is going to be held in person November 11th to the 13th in sunny San Diego, California. So those of you who are lucky enough to live down there or have the freedom to go down there for that event, have fun. It's supposed to be a great event. Retail price increase on Mr. President. I think we talked about that. There's a new edition of rules for Hitler's Reich. Reportedly, the previous rules were not good. Counter trays, boxes back in stock. Board Game Chronicle got a big highlight here for their Pacific War coverage, which is great. Okay, Inside GMT stuff, which is, like general articles about their games. Generally worth reading, if assuming that it's about a game you're interested in. Okay, charging and shipping. Currently charging and shipping. As of when they posted this. Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe Musket and Pike Dual Pack. This Accursed Civil War, which was like the pack that if you just needed that part of the dual pack, then you just ordered that. So it was kind of printed along with the dual pack. The Salerno 43 mounted map. 43? Yes, 43 mounted map. Extra printing of that, and the Stalingrad 42 expansion. Now, the next charges will happen on Thursday, September 1st. That will be for Battles for the Shenandoah, a Death Valley expansion, which I am on the hook for. New printings of Cuba Libre, Fire in the Lake, and actually that's all the reprints. Then Fields of Fire, the Bulge campaign, which could be interesting. Norway 1940, a PQ-17 expansion. This has been on P500 and has made its number for years. So it will finally be printed is encouraging. And I've got PQ-17 and it looks neat. I just haven't had a chance to get it to the table yet, like so many other things. I don't feel that bad about my shelves of shame, but that is one that I would like to get to the table very much, and I haven't had the chance. Last 100 Yards mission pack number 1. Next charge will be for Charioteer and Skies Above Britain. Looking at this list, I'm encouraged that I think the only thing I'm on the hook for is Battles for the Shenandoah, but I may still have an open order for the Norway 1940 expansion as well. And then At Sea is basically that stuff. At the printer, it loading as of the posting. It looks like they're supposed to leave a few days ago. We're Charioteer and Skies Above Britain. And then at the printer, no ship date yet, are Banish the Snakes. That's Kevin McPartland game. It looks pretty interesting. Battle of White Plains, which is one of the battles of the American Revolution system. Dominant Species Marine second printing. Inferno, which is a Levian campaign game, which I have pre-ordered. Next War Poland second edition. Next War Supplement number 3, which I need to make sure I order. Sekigahara 5th printing, Russian campaign and Russian campaign mounted map boards, and Twilight Struggle Red Sea. And then going to the printer, Ancient Civilizations of the Middle East, Clash of Sovereigns, New Paths to Glory, and The Last 100 Yards, Volume 1, second printing. And then I didn't really see anything different on final art and proofing. The bold ones are the ones that changed. In the art department, now they've added Grand Prix, new track pack, and Plantagenet, which is another Levian campaign series game. And then nearing art department readiness, there is nothing new here. And so we've got a bunch of links to find people who do content about GMT games, including myself. Please check all those out. Clash of Sovereigns. This looks like the rule book. This I'm interested in, by the way. This looks pretty interesting. Panzer North Africa. I'm not into Panzer. I'm resisting the temptation to get into Panzer. This is the cover to Tanto Manta, which is a very period-looking cover, and I'm not sure I like it. So, I mean, we've definitely got, you know, the Habsburgs happening here, if you know what I'm saying. And then here's the near final map for Congress of Vienna, which I think is part of the Great Statesman series. And I don't believe I've pre-ordered that, but I should buckle down and get that done. And the British Way is an upcoming coin game. So there's a bunch of goodies here. More goodies from Red Dust Rebellion, which again is another one of those I should just order. Mr. President, which is not normally in my wheelhouse, but actually does look kind of neat. And then reprint tracking for those who are interested in the reprints. There's nothing on this reprint list right now that I particularly feel I need to champion for viewers. So since there were two and they took them both off over the span of the last year and a half or so. So once again, welcome everybody for coming tonight. I really much appreciate it. Let me get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. Pull my outline back up. And here we go. We have, I've now set up for the record. There's now 3 monitors here. There's this one with the show outline, this one with StreamYard, and this one with YouTube, so I can actually see all the YouTube business. So hopefully I haven't missed any amazing content in the chat so far. So catch me up if I did. I will also mention there is a new addition to the social media links in the video description. That is TikTok. I am now on TikTok. Why am I on TikTok? I'm not sure. It seems a bad format for tabletop wargaming. And in fact, I'm not sure what to do with it. But if nothing else, I can sit on it. So if you're on TikTok, go ahead and follow me. I did a little video, 15, 10, whatever it was, second video today about, hey, go watch the live stream tonight. So lots of interesting things. Justigard has mentioned that he was a playtester on The British Way, which is, I actually have a book on the subject of British decolonialism or decolonizing or whatever you want to call it. And it is an interesting topic. So John is not happy with the Tanto Manta cover art. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so on the one hand, there is certainly over the years, there has been a developed GMT house art style, which some feel may have become kind of stale. So I think we can appreciate the covers that break away from that. They've now done a fair number of those. But I'm not crazy about that cover either, I gotta tell you. So yes, please do thumbs up the video. Thanks folks for encouraging people to do that. DMJ284 is asking about discount codes for Noble Knight. Try NEH Show. I'm not sure if that is active right now, but Dan didn't tell me if it's not. So Tony from Tony's Board Life is here. Thanks, Tony, for coming by. Tony is also an Ohioan, but he is from the other armpit of Ohio, as opposed to the one that I just moved to. So the real armpit of Ohio is other armpit of Ohio is, of course, Youngstown. But so Tim Zale says that NEH Show doesn't work anymore. You talk to Dan about that. Dan is in charge of that. So if Noble Knight wanted to give me an Ardwulf's Lair code, I would share it with you, but they don't because I'm a peasant. So, I think they asked us. I think they asked Dan that at one point, and they got maybe not 100% straight answer for some not a particularly good reason. Chad Kennedy's asking about Clash of Arms Battles of the Age of Reason, which is outside of our topic range this evening, but I'll mention I haven't played any of them. However, it is basically a fork of the Labatt system, but unlike the Labatt system, there's just one rule set and there's not 70 million rule sets. In addition to that, I'm told that once you learn the game, you can basically play it off the tables and never have the player aids and never have to look at the book. And that either means good design or really good player aids, and that's very encouraging. There's a fair number of people that like it. What has kept me away from it by and large is a lack of interest in any of the battles that it covers. But most of what I've seen that it covers are battles of Frederick the Great, and there's at least one, maybe two American Revolution battles as well. So if you're into either of those at a quite detailed level, both in terms of scale and rules detail, then I think Battles of the Age of Reason is maybe something to look at. In addition, Clash of Arms has just put out a new version of the Battles of the Age of Reason primer, which is like a small mini kit to learn the game system from. So that so we actually got a ticket going through Ashland over the weekend. So Ashland reliably speed traps kind of constantly. So, and that was up and down I-71. All right. So having done, we've already talked. Oh, so if I didn't mention this, we have ended our Guadalcanal campaign of Pacific War, but I've got another Pacific War play thing coming up. And we have started last Blitzkrieg. So we have 3 people playing. I am playing the Germans on the northern side. The natural split there seems to be 2 German players and 1 American player. Now, that may prove to be a less optimal split further into the game, but certainly initially, the Americans have relatively little on the map, so it seemed like a logical opening. So maybe we'll have a different opinion in a while. So it is not an accurate. Let me highlight Carl here, and oh boy, we're totally backed up here. So they are not the same system. So that we're clear on that. But it's my understanding that there's a shared lineage there. So it's not earlier Labatt, if that makes it any clearer at all. And I don't know that, except maybe in the vaguest way, that knowing Labatt will help you learn BAR. So, but, you know, I'm more than happy to accept corrections on that, to be honest. All right. So I have actually created a list of major conflicts between 1865 and 1914. But that list, I mean, if you look, you can look this up on Wikipedia and figure it out. But ID Jester, thanks for coming by. You can go to Wikipedia and look up the huge list of conflicts. And among the categories of conflicts that you will find on that list include a lot of what I will probably clumsily characterize as wars of colonialism, various revolts against British rule or Dutch rule or French rule in various places in the world. I think only one of those, though, does make the list of conflicts that are a little more famous, on which there's been at least 1 or 2 games. And then wars of, I mean, I guess this is wars of colonization too, wars of against Native Americans in the Native American parts of the North American continent. So there's that. We are seeing more games on those topics in recent year. Mo from Mo's Game Table, thanks for stopping by. However, once we get through there's a lot, and I mean, I could like spend the whole 2 hours just listing off those names, right? And many of them would be, there's some things you'd recognize in there, but a lot that you wouldn't. So the first one I have is the Danish German War of 1864. This may have been, somebody mentioned Schleswig-Holstein, and that may have been Agre Day mentions, I think this is the conflict we're talking about there, in which that territory ended up passing either to Prussia or to some Prussian satellite at the time. The next big one is the Austro-Prussian War. Obviously, this is a key event in the timetable of German unification. This is, in some sense, probably the thing that decided whether ascendancy in the German Sprachraum, as it were, was going to be the Austrians, who were waning by that time, or the Germans. I mean, the Austrians had been waning for some time by then. So that's whoops, that is in the wrong stack. That isn't by itself is not news. And that's 1866. Okay. Legion Wargames does have a bunch of games in this series. And one of the things that's not on my list, but I'll mention, are the New Zealand Wars, which Legion has a game about, which I don't really know much about the game, but it looks fabulous. The map is just totally gorgeous. The Gran Chaco War, and a bunch of wars in South America and Central America as well. There's a lot of them. So this is an interesting question, William Aarons. Thanks first of all for the support, and thanks for the question. This is true, but we've nevertheless seen a kind of a decent number of games on the Franco-Prussian War and on the various aspects of the Franco-Prussian War, or on various battles of the Franco-Prussian War, or on the whole thing. There's half a dozen games I can think of just off the top of my head that cover the whole thing. And that's kind of, I mean, that's not a lot, but it's kind of it's a lot more than, say, the Austro-Prussian War, which is, I believe, a little more closely contested than the Franco-Prussian War, which was not a closely contested war at all, as led by that fine fellow Napoleon III. So I think this is a problem, but I'm not sure it's this problem. I'm not sure it's why we don't really have very many games covering conflicts in this period. Crimean War is before the U.S. Civil War. I had to check that, by the way, because I know very little about the Crimean War, other than the Crimea was involved and the Russians. But yeah, it was a little bit before the U.S. Civil War. Now there's of course multiple S&T games on the Franco-Prussian War, and that's actually the next one on the list, because it's of all of these lists, I think to wargamers at least, it's probably the most famous. There's a few others that have gotten a decent amount of coverage, but yeah, Doug Sunsets mentions that the Austro-Prussian War wasn't all that close, and the Franco-Prussian War lasted longer than that, to be fair. But that got real complicated for a number of reasons, not necessarily directly related to results on the battlefield, too. And Carl from the Wargame Bootcamp mentions Compass Games 1866, The Struggle for Supremacy in Germany, which is a Paths of Glory type of system, which I've heard good things about, but I have not personally played. James Whitmer asks if there's a States of Siege game on Rourke's Drift. I thought there was a Zulu War, or Zulus on the Ramparts, or something like that. I'm not sure that that's Rourke's Drift, but it is. I don't know that it's. Look that name up. Let me put it that way, and that may be the game you're talking about, and that would be a good topic for a States of Siege type of format. First and Second Boer Wars. So they're all in this. They're in this. Well, I'm only aware of the two. I don't know that there was a third one. I don't know very much about these either. But it's a basically rebellion by the Boers, who are basically Dutch colonial farmers against British rule in South Africa and thereabouts. And there's of the ones I saw in the period, there is the First and Second Boer War. The first one is 1880 to 1881, and the second one is 1899 to 1902. The Agri Day mentions that Spanish publishers are publishing Spanish games on topics not covered by typical English publishers. I'm aware that that's happening, but I don't have my ear to the ground on that because I don't read Spanish. So Charles Latorre mentions On to Paris, which is the Franco-Prussian War from Compass Games. It uses a similar system to the Victory Games Civil War. I have heard complaints about I've heard complaints about tactile problems in the game, as in, like, you're keeping track of everything on a general records track that gets super duper congested, but that it basically plays pretty well. I don't know that anybody's raving about it, but it looks interesting. And if you're particularly interested in that topic, then that is definitely one I would have a look at. John C., thank you very much. Much appreciated. John Paniski designed a war on the Philippine-American War, which is on my list, 1899 to 1902. And apparently this was published with Battles Magazine. So the Philippine-American War is where Blackjack Pershing first made his name by crushing some civilians. So there's that. There were some maybe not pretty incidents in that conflict. Hill of Doves. That is a game I have seen, but I don't know enough about to comment on exactly even what conflict it is on. There have been a couple of games on Rook's Drift, however, I can tell you that, at least one of which has been done by decision, and I think what that means is that more than one have been done by decision. So once again, John, thank you very much for that pointer. I would be interested in...
I didn't understand that.
Oh, come on. The phone's acting up now. Anyway, I would be interested in a game on a lot of these topics, right? And the Philippine-American War is one of them. But I do think that that's kind of a tough ask, right? I think, Coin might be a good venue for a game on that topic. So, what else is on my list? I didn't catch the timing on the Taiping Rebellion. I think that might have been before the U.S. Civil War, but the Boxer Rebellion is during this time. There have been a couple of games on that, and that's an interesting topic. I'm not sure how well it would game, but that is a pretty interesting topic for a lot of reasons, one of which is the actual conflict itself, but another of which is this really rather bizarre situation where basically all the colonial powers kind of band together to crush the Boxer Rebellion, to the extent that it's really strange. And there are reasons for it. It didn't happen randomly, but kind of everybody got together and decided they needed to step on the Chinese, and have teamwork and stuff. Super weird. There are some games on the Battle of Isandlwana. I don't know that I'm doing that correctly. Drew Detterer said, first of all, Drew, welcome back. Thanks for coming. Mentions that the Taiping Rebellion is in the 1850s. That's what I thought, but it wasn't on the list that I looked at. Jeff Beeler mentions Chinese Gordon in the Sudan. That's interesting, too. That, of course, would be a Khartoum type of thing. And I'm pretty sure there's at least a game or two on that. William Bird mentions the Victorious Cross games from Worthington, which cover actions in South Africa. I don't know that it's all Boer War stuff as such. In fact, I don't believe it is, but those were, I think, pretty early releases from Worthington, and certainly everything they're doing now is extremely high component quality. So I think Khartoum, I didn't catch it on my list, but Khartoum is I think it's in this time frame. I could be mistaken. And somebody asked about Pax Britannica. That kind of overlaps with this period at least. But that is a game it's an interesting game mechanically and thematically, and I think we're probably not going to do it justice. I've played it once, and I did enjoy it, but I don't feel comfortable enough about it because it's been a while to really analyze it. Let me put it that way. Sino-Japanese War. So the second Sino-Japanese War is starts in 1937, right? So the first Sino-Japanese War is 1894 to 1895, and other than it being the Sino-Japanese War, so it's the Japanese versus the Chinese, I know nothing about it. So Iggy Crichton, this is off topic, but I'll at least throw you a bone on this. There's a fair number of games on the Spanish Civil War, particularly. There's less than there should be on the parts of World War II in the Pacific that happened before September 1939. There really should be more on that. So Doug mentions that Pax Britannica is a slow game, which lines up with my experience. And it can fall apart if somebody doesn't know what they're doing. I could certainly see that that's true. The Russo-Japanese War. There's a few games on this. This is an interesting topic. This is, of course, the Russians getting spanked by the Japanese and then sailing the Russian Baltic fleet around the world to get annihilated by the Japanese at sea as well. And that, as they say, was that. So it is a fairly interesting conflict in a number of ways. There have been a couple of games about it, including games on parts of the land elements, and particularly the big. I'm gonna choke on the name of the big naval battle that the Japanese and the Russians fought, and the Russians got annihilated. Yep, somebody will mention it in the chat. Battle of Port Arthur is the famous land engagement. It's really kind of a siege. And Teddy Roosevelt was involved in the peace between Russia and Japan. At the time, my understanding of that situation means Tsushima Straits. Yeah, John C., thank you very much. Both powers were ready to call it a day at the point at which they actually signed the treaty, but it was did not look contributed substantially to the unrest around the Tsar. Let me put it that way. The last thing on my list is, in fact, the Mexican Revolution, which starts just before World War I, a couple years before World War I. And 1910 to, I didn't write it down, but John Stanley says 1910 to 1920. And that sounds approximately right to me. That's a really interesting topic. And Gringo takes place during the Mexican-American War in the 1850s or late 1840s, something like that. Where a lot of American Civil War folks who would later rise to enormous prominence cut their teeth in the Mexican War. So you get a bunch of those names in Gringo, and that's pre-Civil War. Jeff Anderson mentions Pax Pamir, which is a political game set in Afghanistan during the Great Game between Russia and Great Britain. I have heard wonderful things about Pax Pamir, but I haven't played it. At some point I might. It's not, I mean, it doesn't necessarily look like it's my thing, but that does not necessarily... This is true. Mexican War, 1846 to 48. So roughly 20 years before, a little less than 20 years before the U.S. Civil War. Jeff Beeler asks about the 3 steam navy wars in South America. I'm not sure what that is referring to, but one of the things that I came across is the War of the Pacific, which was fought amongst South American powers. And that's a naval conflict. And there's a couple of those. And in fact, the next game in the Flying Colors series, I think that's the next one, is going to cover those naval engagements of those South American naval battles during that period. So that's actually pretty neat. I'm not sure, Stigler, and I don't want to open the box and derail the show to find out. I'm not sure if I have the expansion or not. So, Iggy Kricktal, I think there is absolutely no chance of a reprint for Gringo. I wish I didn't feel that way, but I feel that way. So, there's a whole bunch of conflicts, between the British and various colonized peoples in this. It's not just the British, but there's a lot that the British are involved in. Alan Salazar says, Compass just released Brief Border Wars 2. Did they release that, or did they put that up for pre-order? That's what I thought it was. There is an S&T game on the War of the Pacific, and I kept stumbling across it while looking for War in the Pacific. So, Silver says that the expansion Battles with the Gringos has the battle that won Mexico independence from France, fought on Cinco de Mayo in 1862. I think that's the Battle of Puebla. And where I was in Mexico was in the state of Puebla. So Cinco de Mayo is not really a Mexican Independence Day in Mexico, but they love it in Puebla. So this looks very interesting, by the way, this Napoleonic series from those folks. I have managed the Europa Simulazione folks. I shouldn't just say those people. I should say that name because it's awesome. So the Northwest Rebellion in Canada in 1885. I don't know anything about that. That's for sure. Robert Moffat. Yeah, it got nice. We had torrential rains that cut through here a couple hours ago, and then it became nice somehow. We had a huge storm. So let me give you move news at this point, right? I don't have another video in the works right now, and I probably won't for at least a couple of weeks. Then I might, because by then I'll have all the shelves up and I'll be able to like do the semi-permanent stationing, right? So the move in is basically done. We're not going to be done unpacking for months, but fine. I'm not going to get bent out of shape over that. What we are still doing is still getting stuff out of the old house. Now, mostly that's trash at this point. There is some stuff that we need, including my shelves and some other stuff. But mostly that's cleanup material. John Longshirt, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Appreciate the support. And I, of course, agree that we could use more games on these topics. And I mean, there have been some. There's Joel Toppin has done a couple, right? And I'm not sure which ones Joel has done and which ones Joel hasn't done, so I don't want to quote the wrong games. There's also Avalon Hills Comanche, which, to be honest, I've never looked at. There's a game called I Will Fight No More Forever that I'm picturing it in my head as something that appeared in Against the Odds, but maybe it was Paper Wars. I'm not sure. Might even have been Compass, actually. So John, I agree that certainly there's room for more games on these topics. War of the Triple Alliance. I'm not sure when that was exactly. It may have popped into. So yeah, Legion does have a series of Indian war games, including a Custer's Last Stand game. I'm not sure what that looks like as a game. I mean, I've seen the box. I know Adobe Walls is another one. They may have done one on the Alamo too, for that matter. But I don't know what Custer's Last Stand looks like as a game. I don't. It's been a long time since I read anything about that. I mean, literally since grade school. So I'm not sure I really have the feel of the historical context around it. John C. mentions Navajo Wars and Comancheria by Joel Toppin. John says they're not war games, and I mean, I have not played either. That looks accurate to me. That looks like an accurate statement, but they don't all necessarily have to be war games, right? There are historical games that aren't war games that still interest me. Rosebud Creek, Matt Davidson mentioned. Thank you very much for mentioning. I think that's the other one in the series. I don't know if I'd characterize them as Euros or not, but I don't know that I'd characterize them as war games. But again, that's fine. One of the things that I'm actually, the more I read about it, the more interested I am in it is Cross Bronx Expressway from GMT. That actually sounds super interesting to me. It's about basically it's an urban planning game. I'm unaware of much else in that space. It is a historical topic. I am interested in that game. As a result, Wade Moore says War of the Triple Alliance right after the U.S. Civil War and Springfields and Charles Rifles. That certainly makes sense. 1864 to 1872. That's a long time. So there is also Jeff. I'm confused by this comment. Pax Porfiriana board game is called Lords of the Sierra Madre. So there is a game called Lords of the Sierra Madre from Decision of all places, and there are people that really like that game. I've never played it. I had the sense that Pax Porfiriana is a totally different thing, and maybe not on the same topic, but I'm not sure. Thinking about it. The Balkan Wars. This is a good one. This is not on my list, but it should be. The Balkan Wars that happened just before, well, not just before, but before World War I are one of the reasons why that area is a giant powder keg, right? So Brian Jarvis, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Just wants to say thanks for all we do here to keep us engaged in the hobby. Thanks very much. That's great to hear. The support is much appreciated. So this way we can, we can keep doing this. So John C says that Indian Wars of the American West is the Legion Wargame series on U.S. Indian Wars. Okay, and I guess there's 3 of them, and I don't know if that's an active series anymore or not. I would hope that it is. I'd like to, we like to see. We all say at least. That's a thing we could talk about at some point. Maybe not tonight, but I'll mention it tonight. Is a lot of us in the big mouth space talk about how we want to see games on new and different topics. And yet when comes time to go get out the credit card and go buy games, we buy bulge games and East Front games about the same old things that we got 100 other games on. So we could all probably be a little better at that, right? So for that reason, I might just take the plunge on something like Cross Bronx Expressway. So Marty Sample says that Lords of the Sierra Madre was from the same subject and designer as Pax Porfiriana. Okay, I didn't. That was not something I knew. So thanks, Marty, for that info. And maybe that means I'm more interested in Pax Porfiriana, or maybe that means I'm confusing Pax Porfiriana with Pax Pamir. That's just as plausible, actually. Did I mention the Russo-Turkish War? Because that is on the list. Jeff Beeler mentions it, 1877 to 1878. And of course, there's kind of a lot of conflicts happening between the Russians and the Ottoman Empire at that time. So kind of take your pick on this. Dating back to well before Napoleon, this conflict was happening between the Russians and the Ottomans. It's still very drinkable. I think it's a little boring, the Singleton of Glendulin, but it's very drinkable. I think there's multiple editions of Lords of the Sierra Madre as well. And another late entry on my list that I skipped over somehow is the Spanish-American War. It's time to get some more counters punched here. So these are weird counter sheets, by the way. Instead of banks of 20, they are counters. They are banks of 30 counters. That's not a problem, but it's weird. There's a bunch of conflicts that happen in between the Italians and the Ottomans. I don't know, not necessarily wars, but friction that resulted in some people getting killed between the Italians or various Italian states at the time and the Ottomans. And of course, German unification happens after the American Civil War. And now that I was about to say it, I'm less confident in the answer that the Italian unification was just before the Civil War. But they both happen in that basic time frame. Very interesting about Pax Porfiriana. I think what is happening there is that I am actually mixing it up with Pax Pamir, neither of which I have played. So me being stupid explains a great deal, as usual. Interesting. So these are a different color than the rest of the French units. But they're French leaders still. This may be a scenario distinction, which means I probably need to, I think it is, in fact. I think I'll need to sort these out with that in mind. So let's get a tray out here. So just checking the comments here. So the Russo-Turkish War game that Alan Salazar mentioned, S&T has over the years covered a lot of these, right? I mean, if you're looking for games on these topics, the number one single place to look in it is probably Strategy and Tactics magazine, right? So, and the Russo-Turkish War game specifically, I've heard pretty good things about. So it's sounding like Italian unification happens kind of contemporaneously with the U.S. Civil War, but wraps up afterwards. John C. The Legion Games website is weird. It's just weird. They've got a weird pre-order system, which I'm not telling you don't pre-order Legion War Games. They got a number of fascinating things in the pipeline, including a hot dry season Vietnam operational game, which is fantastic, which you should all go take a look at and pre-order. So, but their pre-order system's unconventional, right? I mean, you can read into that what you want. It's just not the way anybody else handles it. You have to register the pre-order on in a different way than you would a regular order, and it's a bit confusing. Next, so I can imagine why. I first of all just need to find something that fits into that slot, but the color doesn't match either, and that kicks off my OCD. And it's a shorter box than the rest of the boxes by about 2 or 3 millimeters. That's interesting and annoying. Not something I'm going to write Gene Billingsley about, though. Has there been a decent game on the Mongol invasion? Well, Mongol invasion of what would be, I guess, my question. But because the Mongols invaded kind of a lot of stuff. So I'm not sure which Mongol invasion we're talking about, but certainly there's room for games on that topic. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, there's only so much you can do. There's a bunch of stuff on that Legion Games website that is in a indeterminate state of quantum entanglement or some shit like that. Which is unfortunate because there's some of them are quite interesting looking games, and I'm not sure why they don't get more attention than they do. Matt Davidson, of course, mentions the Devil's Horsemen, which is a good call. That is tactical battles, however. So there's that. And that's GBOH. Well, I mean, the Mongols did a lot after Genghis Khan, so I mean, I'm not sure that's a very broad request. Let me put it that way. Tim Sales says that Paper Wars has a strategic game on Mongol invasions, and I'm pretty sure this is something that we've seen pop up in S&T in the past as well. Block Oddity, yeah, we've actually already mentioned the Philippine-American War already, and most Americans probably have never heard of it. Probably most Americans at this point don't know who John J. Pershing was either, but that is the state of the educational system. What can I say? So I'm not sure which battle, and it's in the other room, so I can't grab it off the shelf. I'm not sure which specific battles off the top of my head Devil's Horseman has. There's also an expansion for Devil's Horseman, so there's more than that. Joe Perez mentions the Nomenon game. I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but you know the game I'm talking about. So it sounds like that was a game that they took pre-orders for and didn't deliver. Is that right? Stephen Reynolds mentions The Great Wall by Awaken Realms, which is a Euro. Okay, so that might be interesting. I don't know. It's something that I might not ordinarily look at. Let me put it that way. So one thing that Legion doesn't do is take your money until like it's close, right? So there's that. So I appreciate that that is something that they're doing, or not doing, as the case may be. Yeah, there's like 2 separate sets. I think the light in here, although the camera's picking it up perfectly fine, the light in here is not great. And one of the things I was talking to my wife about is if there's going to be actual gaming in this room, then we definitely need to get some lights, because the overhead lights just kind of suck. And I've got a couple extra lights in the room, one of which is bouncing off the ceiling on my face, so the video doesn't look like garbage. Yeah, I don't know what's up with this. That game actually looks pretty neat too. I was like, "Ooh, this looks cool," and then I, did a little bit digging on it. I'm like, "Oh, this has been knocking around for years now." So, if they'd like to actually publish it, I might buy it. But Drew Detterer mentions Shogun Total War. I think I have that. If I do, I have literally never played it. The walls in here, you can't see the walls from in the camera angle, but the walls are kind of medium brown, or maybe a dark tan. It's a bit of a weird color, and I'm pretty sure they used it down here because it was extra paint from upstairs. But the ceiling is white, and the ceiling is about 7.5 feet tall down here. So it's not a full height ceiling basement, but it's close enough that it doesn't bother me. I was a huge fan of the Total War games at one point. And then there came a day when I simply lost interest in them because they weren't telling me anything. They're good games, but I was more interested in the strategic part of the game than the tactical part of the game. And frankly, the more interesting part of the game is the tactical part of the game because it gives you a sense of what's going on in the battlefields. Whereas the strategic part of the game is pretty much a Civ clone, but less good. So the magic happens, I think, in the fact that the game has both, but they're not equally good. And so I was, I got kind of unsold myself on the Total War series at one point. There are still YouTube channels that do nothing but historical Total War coverage. Not to mention the fact that there's now 13 different Warhammer Total War games, which is actually a kind of a good call on their part, right? I mean, it's a popular IP, and it is a format that, because it's fantasy and not historical, you don't really care about historicity or anything like that. So I wouldn't get hung up on that. So if I wanted to do Warhammer anything, Warhammer Total War would be one thing that I would look at. Greg B mentions that Legion is a one-man show. I believe that is correct. I think that's Randy, and that's basically it. And that is surely proving to be a bottleneck. I only have, I think, 2 Legion Games products. I have Target for Today and Target for Tonight, and they're both very nice products. So that's my benchmark for them. We're getting to the point where we're nearly done with the French here. I wonder how many. I guess I'm going to have roughly a counter sheet, maybe not quite a full counter sheet done by the time we're done tonight. I'm about out of gas on clipping tonight, to be completely honest. Steve Joel just mentions Deadly Woods was good. I'm not shocked by that. Ted's a good designer. Ed Holtzman mentions Picket Duty from Legion. Picket Duty actually looks really neat. It just, me getting a copy of Picket Duty was just one of those things that didn't actually occur. So that's a pretty interesting game, actually. Somebody did a video playthrough on that I have it in my head that was Stuka Joe, but I might be thinking of B-17 Queen of the Skies instead. His epic playthrough of that might have been somebody else. B-29 and Hell Over Korea. That's true. They've got those as well. There's lots and lots of interesting products. Brian Foley mentions that Deadly Woods. I think that is from Revolution Games. Now I've got 7 or 8 Revolution Games items. I think that's correct because they've done most of the Blind Sword Civil War games, and I have all of those except for the Devils to Pay, which is, I believe, from Tiny Battle Publishing, which I should probably get at some point. It just hasn't managed to occur. Dien Ben Phu from Legion is pretty well regarded. I can tell you that. I've seen that on tables more than once. Perfidious Albion. So this is another thing that maybe we'll have a whole thing on at some point is ancients that aren't ancient Rome or ancient Greece. And there's really not much. There's Genesis, which is a Richard Berg game from GMT, which is somewhere on the shelf behind me. I don't believe it's in the frame. There's Cradle of Civilization that Compass put out not too long ago. There's, if you count Civilization, and I don't know that I would in this particular context, there's Chariots of Fire for GBOH. Again, we're for the tactical stuff. We're going to keep coming back to GBOH on this. Charles Latour mentions that Legion's a Splendid Little War is the Spanish-American War in Cuba. Well, that's interesting. Agri Day. This is a good question. Let's pull this up. Do we think any new publishers will pop up in the next year or two for war games, which the market pretty well covered for the current publishers? I think both things are true. I think we will probably see at least one new publisher in the next year. That's not inside information. That's just me guessing that we'll see a new publisher sometime in the next year. It's difficult for that place to draw traction outside of like the top 2 tiers of publishers, right? I guess top 3 tiers of publishers, because on some level there's GMT and then there's the other prominent publishers, Decision. But I don't have access to their business records, man. I don't know. Maybe Decision's doing more business than I think they are. I doubt it, but I don't know. Decision's a Gen Con and Origins, and GMT's not. So there's I know that there's Enterprise Games, but it doesn't feel the same as to have the whole crew from GMT come out to either Origins or Gen Con. And I think GMT would get some value out of that, frankly, but GMT disagrees. Joe Perez says GMT has ancient civilizations of the Middle East on P500. That's true, but I think I'd put that in the same category as Civilization, where it's only peripherally a war game, and that's going to sound snobbish, and I don't mean it snobbishly, but I'm aware that there's no non-snobbish way to put that. So sorry. And I do think that the market is pretty saturated, frankly. I've got all just stuff that's coming. To be honest, just this year I've gotten 10 new games, new games, right? Like P500 games from just GMT. So there's a lot of material coming out, and frankly, GMT can't put the games out fast enough. I've got a bunch of new games from Compass. I've got a couple new things from MMP. Not as much from MMP. I'm not sure I've gotten anything new from MMP. No, that's not true. I just got the new Skirmisher, but I think that might be the only new thing I've gotten from MMP this year. And I didn't pre-order it because there wasn't a pre-order, but there might be a product or two from MMP that is pre-ordered that comes out before the end of the year, but I'm not holding my breath till I turn blue in the face about that either. So See, this is kind of what I'm trying to say, Marty, is that everybody's a niche publisher in this hobby. It's just like how big do they look in the niche, right? So let's say there are sort of first tier wargaming publishers, which I would rank with based on no metrical information whatsoever. I would say that's GMT, MMP, Compass, Decision, and that's probably it. And then you've got your sort of second tier publishers, a couple of which I think are pretty close to joining the ranks of the bigger publishers, like Flying Pig and Legion and Revolution Games. And maybe we put Worthington in there. And I'm only hedging that because Worthington does a lot of stuff that I don't consider war games, but they also do stuff that I do consider war games. So there's that. I didn't get the new special ops, and I probably should have. Race for Best Stone, did that not come out last year, or was that this year? I'm remembering that as having been last year, but I could be nuts about that. Lock and Load is another one. DVG is another one that kind of fill out that second tier, and DVG's got, and Lock and Load have got fingers in digital pies as well. That from a revenue standpoint, may, for all I know, make them just as big as anybody else. So. Jeff Beeler mentions that in the 70s, I've talked about this before, both SPI and Avalon Hill had enough staff to field baseball teams or softball teams. That is true. Jeff Beeler, yeah, you're right about that. Ericor was a pre-order game from this year, and that did come out. And Academy Games, right? I have a big blind spot when it comes to Academy Games, and that's not fair to Academy Games. So sorry, Uva, but I just don't have very many of their games. I have the digital version of 1775, which I like. It's good. And I've played the board game version too. Those are good games. Academy was at Gen Con too. Academy understands, like a lot of war game publishers have decided they don't, or they just don't want to deal with it, that conventions aren't just about booth sales. Hollenspiel. We did just mention Worthington. Now I'm going to feel bad for forgetting a bunch. Clash of Arms, right? I think Clash of Arms is not even in that second tier, though. Or I think Hollenspiel absolutely is. So this is basically, not wrong. So you're better off basically setting the money on fire and toasting marshmallows, because then you'll at least have toasted marshmallows. So I don't know if it necessarily cost you $100,000, but to try and make a run at the big time probably does. White Dog Games. They're in the other room. I've got a decent number of White Dog games, actually. There was a point a couple years ago now in which I ordered a giant mother load of games from White Dog and Hollenspiel. And a lot of the games I have from both publishers date from that one spending spree where I bought like 10 games. And of course, you can order them. I mean, you order them separately because they're different websites, but they're all coming from Blue Panther. Australian Design Group, right? I mean, they've been around. Some of these companies have been around forever. Clash of Arms has been around forever. ADG has been around forever. I mean, they've been around since it's probably the 80s, probably the early 80s, but I mean, they've been around forever, right? So, yeah, hopefully, Prettiest Albion, we will see a Black Friday or whatever. I don't care what they call it. Sale from MMP, or not MMP. Well, sure, MMP too. But the fact is, New England Simulations. Now, New England Simulations is an odd duck, though, because I mean, they do like a game every 2 years, right? I mean, Worthington's output dwarfs the output of New England Simulations, probably in terms of titles released and in terms of number of copies shipped. 1979 Iranian Revolution. If you're thinking about the game, was that Steve Jackson? Am I misremembering that, or was that raid on Iran? VUCA simulations. VUCA's been around for a few years though. They're new, but they're not like brand new. Dietz Foundation, that's a good call. I think they've got one game out now or about to be out. So Brian Jarvis, I think this is a great idea. You call GMT up and tell them to send me one, and we'll make that happen. I have not ordered that. Whirligig Games. So Cole Worley's an interesting designer. He's done some very interesting games. I didn't see fit to mention him because I'm not 100% sure that he fits into the wargame space as a designer. That probably sounds snobbish in a way that I'm not willing to call it an eccentricity snobbish. That probably sounds jerkishly snobbish. And I don't mean, but sure. I mean, he's definitely doing historical stuff, and there's definitely some interesting games in that repertoire. I am also very curious about the differences between the different versions of Russian Campaign, considering that we're going to have 3 different versions of Russian Campaign released in the next, little while. So I've heard I've been reluctant to opine on this because I don't know the ramifications. This is not my field. But apparently I have also heard that a tax ruling made in the late 70s or early 80s really hurt the ability of small companies, in this context, game publishers, to maintain inventory. It is absolutely true, however, that SPI and Avalon Hill and some others made an effort at one point to keep everything in print, and that is simply something that no longer occurs. So, and that's too bad, because it would be kind of cool if nothing ever went out of print again, right? I mean, I would like that. Clash of Arms, I was just looking at their website the other day, which has been updated, by the way, relatively recently. It's pretty subtle, but the order page for La Bataille de Mont Saint Jean flipped from pre-order. The image didn't, but the text flipped from pre-order to regular order prices. And OSG, right? I mean, I've got kind of a lot of OSG games at this point. So, and I mean, without a list in front of me, I'm going to forget about it. One Small Step, that's true too. I've got, I think, only one game from One Small Step. Haha. Columbia Games, right? Well, so I think in Columbia's case, they really haven't done anything new for wargaming, but they've reliably, they're like visibly still in business, and they're doing regular Kickstarters for a variety of deluxe editions of their older stuff. That they haven't brought any new games into print, into publication lately, is maybe just a side effect of what else they have going on. So Canvas Temple Publishing is pretty new, by the way. They're 2 years old, I think, or less. John Longshore, John, you're going to get angry letters if you keep this up. I'm just saying. So at some point we may have some news about that. That's not, it's coming out. I'm not going to tell you, Total War's right around the corner. Yeah, Secret Investors have come through. That's not happening, but there might be an anecdote that circulates soon about what they got going on, or at least another bullshit excuse. Yeah, that's true. That was a new product, wasn't it? That was something that I'm not particularly in the market for. But Avalanche Press, right? Avalanche Press is still around. They're still doing stuff. There are people that like their products. They have done some games. They have done at least one game that I do like. They have A bunch of stuff that I don't like. Their production values are in some ways quite high. Their counters, I think, are very nice generally. The boards, not so much. The boxes, not so much. And they are absolutely invisible in anything resembling a distribution channel. So I've literally never seen a game from Avalanche Press in a game store in years, except for the Warzone in Cleveland, because those people are crazy. So, well, Carl, I did mention Europa Simulazione today. Grenier Games from Canada. I don't know. Are they still around? Minden Games. So I don't have anything from Minden Games. I've heard of them. I don't really know a lot about their products. Let me put it that way. And Justagard mentions the RBM Studios. So I admit that I am not crystal clear on exactly what the relationships landscape looks like for Roger. But he's certainly producing stuff under the RBM Studios label now. That includes C3I Magazine, but it also includes some other stuff too. Well, C3I and a bunch of different kinds of merch, and there have been boxed versions of at least one, and maybe more than one, of the C3I games. There was a boxed edition of the Mark Herman Gettysburg game, for example. That's something. So this is. Whether this is true or not, this is absolutely what the common wisdom in the hobby appears to be, because there's absolutely no effort by anybody but maybe GMT to push war games to retail stores. So in Columbus, we have multiple game stores, 4 or 5 game stores, 2 of which carry GMT products. There's actually a new game store at, where the hell was I? Because I went in there last week. There's a new game store, and their one GMT game was the one you'd think, Twilight Struggle. That's the one GMT product that they had. SPW hasn't done anything new in a long time either. So you can debate whether they are still an operational business or not. And certainly Grognard Simulations is, though. They're still cranking stuff out on a very frighteningly regular basis. UNP games, that W1815 was very well regarded, and it got printed at least twice. And that looked pretty interesting, actually. And it just was something you couldn't get very quickly. So this is. So Nathan Landrum says, it seems like wargaming as a hobby is booming with large numbers of publishers these days. I have not been involved in the business side of the gaming hobby for a long time, right? I was part owner of a game store back in the day. I've done things like visit Alliance open houses and stuff like that. But I was never like the lead guy at any one of these opportunities. I've worked in a couple of different game stores. Back when I didn't actually have to earn any money because I was still living with my mom. But I mean, at one point I was doing it part-time just for free. I was getting paid in product, right? Which I was completely amenable with, to be blunt. But Pacific Rim Publishing, that's a good point. They have very little product. Other than Coruscant Pocket 2, which does appear to be, in forward momentum. Perfidious Albion mentions Tactica e Strategia, which is the Polish publisher that puts out some pretty photogenic stuff. I'll tell you, I don't know anything about them other than they are a Polish publisher. They have a lot of different games, and those products are relatively photogenic. Other than that, I don't really know anything about them, and I don't know if that's like something you can get English rules for or anything like that. So where I'm going with the previous statement is that I'm reluctant to, at some level, I want to stop talking about gaming as a business because I'm just some rando. I don't know what I'm talking about, right? I'd rather get somebody like Gene Billingsley or Tony Curtis or somebody like that on to talk about gaming as a business, or Bill Thomas. I mean, or to talk about gaming as a business rather than um, anything else. Okay, so the two bigger game stores in Columbus are the Guard Tower and the Soldiery. The Soldiery's on, I think it's Clintonville. It's on High Street, so it's kind of in the center, north of the center of town, but it's more or less. And then there's a guard tower on the east side, another guard tower on the west side. Both guard towers have a decent selection of current GMT releases. They will also typically have a few things from Compass and or DVG, and sometimes one or two other things. The Soldiery will have, they have a backlist of stuff sitting on the shelf that's been sitting there for years in most cases, including, you know, stuff from Excalibur Games and stuff from Spitzer and stuff that I don't know that I want to pay $100 for a Spitzer copy of Napoleon's Last Battles, that kind of thing. But they do have a decent selection of newer GMT stuff, and sometimes that sits around for a little while as well. Other than that, I've never seen anything from Compass, I've never seen anything from MMP in a Columbus store. Let me put it that way. At the War Zone in Cleveland, yes, I have. But even then, that's mostly older secondhand ASL stuff rather, and in general secondhand stuff. They get some OCS stuff too, though. I mean, so the Guard Tower, I think, is not what it used to be in terms of games. It's not what it used to be in terms of overlap with my interests. Let me put it that way. Uva's would be a good guy to get, actually. He does love to talk about the business, and he is in Ohio. So I'm not sure where exactly he is in Ohio, but I know he's not that far from Columbus. So Gamma Trade Show would be a great place to do that. Does the Gamma Trade Show open to press? I don't know if that's true or not. And of course, John Longshore mentions Diffraction Entertainment / The Knowledge Company and the Second World War series, soon to be expanded with the First World War series. Which, should they do the First World War series before they finish the Second World War series? That is a question that maybe somebody ought to ask. Now, I've got my issues with that system, but at the same time, you kind of have to respect what they're doing, a thing that nobody else is really trying to do, with more ambition than anybody else, with the possible exception of Grognard Simulations in the hobby is showing right now. Yeah, I've never considered. Gamma Trade Show is a trade show. It's not a convention, a public-facing convention, and I'd be afraid to go there because I'd go there and I'd talk to 3 people, and then I'd go to the casino. It's in Vegas, right? Or the buffet. More likely the buffet in my case, but yeah, this is possible too. This is not something I've really talked to David about, but sure. I think this is a little unfair, but only a little, right? The jaw-dropping price tag thing is just completely accurate. It's more different from Europa than you might think. But I mean, you can definitely see that the skeleton there, it is built on the chassis of Europa. So I don't want to downplay that statement either. There are a lot of mechanical differences between any given Europa game and Second World War, but the chassis is the same. And the foundation on which the chassis is sitting is the same, right? It's that. Yeah, I think the scale is just a hair different. I believe it's 15 miles to the hex instead of 16. Marty says the Gamma Trade Show is in Reno, not Vegas. Is that a new thing? I thought it was in Vegas. I could be nuts. I've never been to the Gamma Trade Show, and I don't foresee a scenario in which it would make sense for me to go to the Gamma Trade Show unless my wife would like to go to Vegas. In which case, we might make a trip out of it, and then I spend a day going to the Gamma Trade Show. That I might be able to sell that, but that's not happening anytime soon either. So, yeah, but it's been a long time since I paid any attention. In part because I don't really think Gamma is useful. So I really just haven't paid much attention to the Gamma Trade Show and what goes on there. Whew, Atlantic City. Whew. Okay, I don't really want to go to New Jersey if I don't have to go. If nobody's paying me to go to New Jersey, I'm not going to New Jersey. We'll put it that way. So this is true, and it's probably a little more true. Maybe there's always been a crossover, though. I mean, we've all heard the famous Mark Herman story where the first Gulf War breaks out, and the Pentagon doesn't have a war game on this topic. Nobody, created one, so they run out and buy every copy of Victory Games Gulf Strike they can find, and immediately put the designer under contract, which might have been Mark, I'm not sure, under contract to consult on whatever the Pentagon wants to do with it. So there's always, and then there's stuff that the Rand Corporation has commercially released too. Relatively recently, that hegemony or whatever the hell it was called that they released for several $100s recently. They've released some of their stuff. So there's always been a little bit of that. And I kind of feel like there's a little more now than there used to be, but I'm not convinced in the metrics there. So, I mean, I could certainly go and talk to publishers, but that's the question: is how many wargame publishers are members of Gamma? I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm not going to without looking it up. And then how many of those publishers go to the trade show, and then how many of them are willing to sit down or have time to sit down with me or whatever, and then that's starting to look like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of useful time for the sake of spending at least several $100s to get out there for a couple of days. Origins does have a trade thing, but I'm not 100% sure that it starts the day before. That's another thing that I'm unclear on. So, yeah, I've been in New Jersey. Wasn't impressed. They're certainly the Newark airport totally sucks. I didn't see this, but I would laugh about this if I did. So Dan the Dancing Man from No Enemies Here. There he is. How's it going? Dan, is there a working code with Noble Knight Games right now? Answer that question, if you will. See, the thing with this, though, is if I had Mark on to talk about this topic, what I would want to know about is like stuff that happened back in the Victory Games and SPI era, rather than trying to grill Mark about stuff that's going on in the business side of the hobby now. I've never flown into New York City. I've only flown into Newark. So apparently there's no code right now. Dan, get that fixed. So, oh dear. He's getting offended because I'm dumping on New Jersey. So, there's reasons to live in New Jersey instead of New York City, if those are your two choices. There's also reasons to move to Ohio, including a cost of living that is a fraction of that. So we'll have Dan fix that. Atlantic City. I've never been to Atlantic City. About the only thing I know about Atlantic City is my grandfather used to go there every few years for a couple days to gamble, because it's a lot easier to get to than Vegas, apparently. So this would have been in the early 80s or maybe late 70s, something like that. So my understanding is that White Plains is right outside of New York City. Is that not accurate? Upstate. So I can vouch for. I can totally vouch for. I'm not sure how we're defining upstate New Jersey, but once you get away from the coast and get into like the mountainy country parts of New Jersey, it's like a completely different place. So that's absolutely true. Less than an hour. So that's like 3 miles, I believe, something like that. It's like 3 miles north of Harlem, as I recall. So that sounds like an hour drive. I had better luck. I don't want to say it this way. I hated driving less in New York City than I did in San Francisco. Let me put it that way. But it's pretty high. I mean, it's high pressure driving, right? You're white knuckling the entire time. And I strongly recommend if you're going to visit New York City, don't drive. Or drive and just park the whole time, but which will cost you a pile of money. But okay, just fly in and just take the subway and taxis everywhere, or Uber. I don't know. Now that where you go. William Aarons mentions Great Board Games Company. What about the Century Box in Calgary? I mean, I think they claim to be the largest game store in the world. I don't know if that's true, but I think I heard that. Huh. I don't know anything about White Plains, New York, to be honest. In fact, I think it was on this show that somebody informed me that it is, in fact, just north of New York City, or north something of New York City. So if I'm ever in Calgary, I will definitely visit the Sentry Box. But it is difficult to imagine a scenario that might bring me to Calgary. So, I mean, it sounds awesome. Don't get me wrong. But it's Calgary, okay? I'm more likely to go back to New York City and visit the Complete Strategist. I've been in New York City twice and have not visited the Complete Strategist, which is definitely an oversight on my part. But last time I was there, which was 12 years ago or something like that, I may even not have been back into wargaming at that particular time. So if I'm buying online, I'm normally going to buy from. I used to buy a fair amount from Cool Stuff, but then Cool Stuff decided they weren't going to sell war games anymore. So, okay. So if I'm buying something like that, GMT Compass, that kind of thing, and I'm not buying it directly from the manufacturer, and I'll typically lean into pre-orders, right? So that I both support the manufacturer directly and get a decent discount. So I prefer to do it that way when possible. If I'm ordering from somebody else, I will typically go to Enterprise Games. This is war games, right? For RPGs, I'll typically just skip the whole thing, go to Noble Knight. I will typically go to Enterprise Games or to a Miniature Market, or to Gray Rooster. I've ordered a couple times from Gray Rooster now, and that's been highly successful. So I think one of the Complete Strategist stores just closed, and I don't know what the details are on that. So I'm not sure I remember which one it is. It's not the one in Manhattan, I can tell you that. How a game store can afford to be in business in friggin' Manhattan, I don't know. But Kilroy, I saw that Complete Strategist video. Like I said, the Virginia Complete Strategist, which is the one that I think I didn't even know was there. As far as I'm aware, the one in King of Prussia, PA, is still there, which is, I think we can all agree, a fabulously named municipality, if indeed it is a municipality. So, yeah, the Complete Strategist in Virginia went away. So let's talk about this, actually. So the Board Game Geek marketplace is going away completely. And they had a prototype new marketplace that apparently they decided wasn't working, but they weren't happy with the old marketplace. So they just decided to completely remove marketplaces from Board Game Geek. And people shut their pants, and there was a lot of pushback. I mean, I'm not going to write an angry letter, but that sucks. I mean, I like to have that ability to buy stuff on BGG. I've got my entire Reese Front series almost on the BGG marketplace. So they might be developing a different solution, but that's not just throw what we had away. And I don't know where that's at right now. That may be a rapidly developing situation. So there may be literal news on that today that I don't even know anything about yet. But where I left off is, oh, well, we're thinking about something that will replace the BGG marketplace. That is the step that I left off on. So Grey Rooster has a super primitive website. I believe you can also buy from them on eBay, but the prices are a little higher. They're in Ohio. Don't know where in Ohio off the top of my head. I'd have to look that up. They have a primitive ordering system, but when you order, it goes out the next day, and it's securely packed and not just rattling around in a really big box. So orders from Grey Rooster that I have seen and have had shipped to other people and asked them specifically about, the packaging and all that stuff, they seem to be running a very good operation there. So yeah, I heard this, but this sounds like nonsense to me. This sounds like an absolutely piss poor replacement for the BGG marketplace. New Philadelphia. Okay. So that's not too far from here, I think. This is okay. So I think that without making major structural changes, I think that great campaigns of the American Civil War, I think the last conflict that it can be successfully applied to in an effective way is probably the U.S. Civil War. Remember, there are scale configurations here too, right? I mean, you need to kind of set it up so that you're moving sizable units around. And in a lot of the conflicts that we've listed here, that isn't a phenomenon that you see. And then obviously in like something like in World War One, in the early, like the first few months on the West Front and maybe some on the East Front, I'm now thinking maybe you could adapt that system to make that work. I think you're probably, if you're looking at adapting that system, and as far as I'm aware, this is a question that gets asked kind of regularly. There's no like concrete plans to adapt that to other periods, but I think you could adapt it to, say, Revolutionary War, or Napoleonics, or something like that. I think you'd end up with something that looks pretty different at the end. But I think it could, in principle, be done. I think you could take that core mechanism and adapt it and make a decent number of changes. Well, so this is true, but don't forget the evolution of warfare inside the Civil War, right? Where we were at the end, not even at the very end, but at the starting in, say, late 1863. Where we're starting to see that sort of static warfare that we saw in World War I too, right? Where you have these massive entrenchments that you can throw human waves at if you want, and you're just throwing lives away. So we started to see that. So there's a lot of evolution even inside the period of 1861 to 65. No, this is definitely not the case. So the game you're thinking of is On to Paris, and it more or less uses the system from Victory Games, The Civil War. I'm pretty sure that's the game you're thinking of. So that's another thing, is you could say adapt that mechanism as far back as certainly as far as the 7 Years' War. Again, there's differences, right? You'd have to make changes, but that core mechanism, do I think it could work? Sure. Clearly back to, say, early wars of Frederick the Great, so War of the Spanish Succession, War of the Austrian Succession. Yeah, I think you could probably get away with that. Back to like the Wars of the Sun King and stuff like that, that's where it starts to get, I think, a little dicier. The games I have on those topics are games that I moved to the other room. The 3 Compass games: No Peace Without Spain, the 9 Years' War, and it's the third one, a Pragmatic War, which is War of the Austrian Succession. So, and there's the upcoming one, which is coming pretty soon, which is No Peace Without Honor, which is the Dutch War. I'm a little unclear as to what they mean by, and this is because I haven't done any legwork on this at all. There's a bunch of things that you could call the Dutch War. So, Dan, thanks for stopping by. Much appreciated. Yeah, that's true, but I know that the game does, Doug. But I know that the game does not cover 80 years. So that's the thing. It's like I'm not sure which corner of that it happens. I know it's one of Louis XIV's wars. But as I'm, kind of invested in that system, so I haven't played any of them yet. So I'm interested in that game as well. John, you could always deal in Bitcoin if you want. I mean, at your own risk, of course. But I mean, there's other way you could Venmo people money, I suppose. But if you're just talking about avoiding the PayPal fees, I'm not sure that any of those other solutions, other than Bitcoin, are going to let you avoid those fees. And with Bitcoin, the problem is you buy $100 worth of Bitcoin, and tomorrow it's worth $30. So, well, this is true. Oops. This is true, but I'm just not clear on exactly what it covers. And again, that's me. It's not that's just what I have legwork I haven't done. That's a super interesting idea, isn't it? So GBACW is a battle level game. So you're talking about something very different at that point. You're talking, I think let's assume as a baseline the 7 Years' War. I think that U.S. Civil War system, and in this we might even expand that definition to kind of include the victory game Civil War system. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting idea. GBACW is a completely different thing. It's a battle level game. You'd basically be getting regimental Zorndorf or whatever you want, and I think that could work. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of games occupying that space that aren't Battles of the Age of Reason or Labatt. And now Campaigns of Frederick the Great, again, I think you'd have to massage the system. But yeah, I think absolutely. So Frederick, you're talking about War of the Spanish Succession, certainly Austrian Succession, and the 7 Years' War, pretty much. So yeah, I actually think that. I mean, Frederick was known for maneuver, right? So. So even Stigler says that the BAR system is better for Frederick the Great than GBACW. I'm actually going to stick up for GBACW a little more than Stigler is here. I think it to some extent is an apples and oranges comparison because they're different scales. GBACW is a regimental scale system. BAR, unless I'm mistaken, and it's a different scale than Labatt, it is a battalion level game. And that's a significant difference, right? In period, that's a significant difference. And again, you'd have to, GBACW is built specifically to replicate, simulate phenomena that you saw on Civil War battlefields, and BAR is intended to be, things you saw on the battlefield at Cologne or something like that. So I think it's an apples to oranges comparison, to at least to some extent. Looking at the comments, this is not a terrible idea, actually. I mean, after all, you can buy anything you want on Amazon, pretty much, even GMT games. Yes. So, I mean, there's a big change in the use of cavalry after Frederick II, right? Then there's another change between the Wars of Napoleon and the American Civil War. These are pretty distinct periods, especially, I'd say, for artillery as well, but especially for cavalry. Okay, so William Marins has done the legwork. It says that no peace without honor covers the period of Louis XIV against the Prince of Orange prior to his involvement in the War of the Spanish Succession. Okay. And you're supposed to have some ability to link these games together too, although they have different maps, so I'm not quite clear on how that's supposed to work. Yeah, this is true. Spanish Succession is quite a bit earlier. This is a joke that keeps happening, by the way. Great Northern War is another one. Yeah, there's some interest. So when we start talking about great campaigns of the American Civil War, you are talking about a system that both highlights the value of maneuver while at the same point challenging you to execute that maneuver in such a way as to pull off a decisive battle. And certainly that is a challenge that the historical commanders in the American Civil War faced. And it was a challenge that was faced in the Napoleonic period, at least from time to time as well. I'm not quite sure that's as applicable to, say, 7 Years' War, but I'm not sure that it isn't. I haven't done enough reading on 7 Years' War. So yes, this is true. And I'm pretty sure this is the case, again, different from, 30 years early or 40 or 50, 40 to 50 years earlier in the 7 Years' War. So this is what Frederick is known for. Yeah. But he also, sometimes really sometimes, not every time, really shown on the battlefield and sometimes really shown in operational maneuver as well. But then again, even Napoleon had his bad days, right? 18 Brumaire, Napoleon was completely out of it and was absolutely garbage on that day. So there are a few games on the Great Northern War, and there was, I think it's Pax Baltica that I'm thinking of that's mentioned in the next comment. There is there an S&T game on that topic as well? I think there is. The ATO game I haven't really looked at. Napoleon had his share of bad day. Waterloo's a bad day for Napoleon. So one of the for one of the classes in which I was required to take to get a history degree, it was a historiography class, and we had to write a proposal which required we didn't actually have to write the paper, but we had to write a proposal for a paper. And one of the sources I quoted was out of an American medical journal speculating on Napoleon's hemorrhoid problems on the day of Waterloo. So, that is a thing you can actually find. That was one of the sources that I had listed in the proposal as a potential source. So what happens if instead of being the guy in charge of the defense of Paris, Davout is with Napoleon instead? What if Berthier is with Napoleon, where instead of, I'm not sure about the exact timing, whether Berthier fell out the window before or after Waterloo. But, what if Berthier is there as well? I think then you might have a completely different day. But that doesn't necessarily mean victory in the campaign or victory for France, right? The coalition's still going to keep fighting. So, this is true too. Stigler points out Stonewall Jackson, who was sometimes brilliant and sometimes clownishly incompetent. He was very erratic. Very erratic. Sometimes Stonewall Jackson had really bad days. So, this is a thing that happens. Prior to like modern warfare, that could be the entire campaign, that one bad day, right? Modern warfare insulates commanders against having a single bad day where you're on the can the whole day, so you're having a bad day. So this is true too. Yeah, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, actually. But I mean, this is the result of the geography, right, and the result of the geopolitical situation that Frederick found himself in. Well, so this is a challenge that I think a lot of designs face, frankly, on these topics. There is a fog of war component to it. How do you do that? I mean, the goal in just to use an example that I've looked at recently is Napoleon's campaign in northern Italy in 1796 and 1797. So Napoleon repeatedly, there are multiple enemy columns coming your way, led by various Austrian chumps, and Napoleon is trying to defeat them one at a time because his force is larger than those individual forces. But if all those individual forces link up, then they have a significant numerical advantage. So how do you replicate that sort of operational initiative? And this is one thing that GCACW is really good at, is simulating that very organically through a very simple die roll. You just keep rolling the dice. That in the earlier games in the series, which reflect the Eastern Theater relatively early in the war, the Confederates just win ties, right? And that's a very easy mechanic. In later games in the series, in particular, something like Atlanta Is Ours, the initiative rule is considerably more complicated, where sometimes the Union may win, sometimes the Confederacy may win, or sometimes some kind of special event might happen. Battle of the Clouds is like that. So Napoleon III's greatest battles. So there's a lot of them, to be honest. Archduke Charles was pretty good. Easily the best Austrian commander of the entire period, eventually sacked after Wagram. But Archduke Charles was pretty good. Archduke Charles was spanking French generals in campaigns in Germany that Napoleon wasn't at before Napoleon becomes emperor. So Charles was not Napoleon, but nobody else on the field was Napoleon either, except for Napoleon. So Napoleon III in an iron cage. So their cavalry's pretty good. I mean, some of their better troops are fine. Command was terrible. Command was an absolute. Either you had these. There's this really clumsy Austrian command structure where they have this sort of joint chiefs of staff type arrangement, but these guys are all like in their 80s. And they've been there forever, and they have no interest in or knowledge of anything that's happened in the last 30 years. So they get a lot of bad, high-level military decision-making. High-level command, and that didn't start to change until Archduke Charles, who was the emperor's brother, right? But it wasn't immediately that he started to have a freer hand to modernize that army. Although they were already trying to modernize the army, prior to 1896, but nothing will motivate modernization of your army like getting spanked on the battlefield will. Jeff Beeler, I don't think so. But Charles was the best Austrian commander. I mean, admittedly, it's like Charles and the Seven Dwarves, right? I mean, but I don't think he was. I think Barclay's an underrated commander. Actually, I think that's actually a really astute comment. I don't think Wellington's as good as Napoleon, but Wellington on a good day is better than Napoleon on a bad day. And Barclay de Tolly was a pretty good in 1812. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of smart stuff that Barclay de Tolly did. I think he's a bit underrated, and situationally, he's underrated by the people in charge of the Russian army at the time too. So, and of course, yes, we are in fact talking about Charles Barkley, Jedi Master Charles Barkley. So, third best commander of the Napoleonic Wars. This is a great question. I don't think it was Blucher. I can tell you that. It's hard to say with some of these guys like Sir John Moore, maybe, but he gets killed relatively early in his career in the Napoleonic Wars. So there's that. Suvorov, but Suvorov goes away real early in the period as well. Undefeated, by the way, but that's because he ran away in 1897. So that's a good question. I just gonna throw Barclay de Tolly out. I mean, it's not Bernadotte, that's for sure. And I guess I'm talking about like major national leaders that led armies, right? And not like Napoleon's subordinates, right? Which is an excellent video called Napoleon's Marshals from Epic History TV. It's like a 6-part series dealing into the whole biography of all of the marshals of Napoleon, and it's a really good series. I will not spoil the top 5 for you. You should actually watch it. But Bernadotte counts as twice, right? He counts as one of Napoleon's subordinates and as an opposing enemy commander. At which I think he was effective, but he's not trying to like counter Napoleon blow for blow or defeat him in a set piece battle. He's trying to preserve a much smaller Swedish army at that point. The Russians did have some good generals. Yeah, so Suvorov dies in 1800, and he is quite old at that time and had been not well for quite a while after that. Yeah, I think I've watched it twice, and I think I've watched the last episode 3 times. Those are very good. Marshmallow cheesecake. That sounds a little bit weird, but okay. All right, so let's move toward wrapping us up here. So what do we got this week? We've got Traveler Tuesday tomorrow. That video is uploaded. I hope to have an unboxing video. Don't know what it's going to be yet. One of the things that came in, I've got another thing from VUCA Simulations to do an unboxing of. I don't know if that's going to be this week, but I also have Bonaparte in Italy. This is the 1979 Campaigns of Napoleon series game that was a Kevin Zucker design, released by OSG, was released later under a very similar name, but as a 1-map game. But I've got the original 3-map game. I got it on Amazon. That'd be great. On eBay, and I didn't pay $1 million. It was expensive, but not like crazy. It wasn't a couple $100. It was under $100. Let me put it that way. So we'll have to check out that real-time history as well. Those are supposed to be very good, and I have not yet had time to watch them. So, and then we've got a game night on Wednesday night and an OCS night on Thursday night. So that'll be awesome. But I hope to have an unboxing video on Thursday as well. I've also got at least one other, side video that's in the pipeline that I just have to get the editing done on. And I have resumed work on the OCS tutorial series. So hopefully we will manage to make that happen at some point now that we're starting to kind of settle in and stuff like that. I kind of want to get the Pacific War thing done first, but the OCS tutorial series is on track once again. It's something that I didn't give up on at any point. It's just that a lot of shit was happening. So we weren't going to do that. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming by. It looks like we topped out at 1:30, which is pretty good night considering we haven't had a giveaway. I will mention that at some point in a couple of months, we will have a episode 100. We will be having some giveaways on episode number 100. This is episode 87. So we got 13 weeks. In 13, that's about a quarter, right? Yeah, roughly. So in about 1 quarter, so late in the year, we'll have, which will also be our 2-year anniversary. So we'll just call it show 100 anniversary. Okay. So, and I was absolutely stunned and appalled and terrified to find out that there's apparently 2,500 uploads on this channel. I'm not sure how I've even managed that. So that is a thing that is happening, and we're closing in on 1 million minutes. I think it's 1 million minutes. Is it minutes or hours? I forget. I don't have these numbers in front of me. So maybe we'll talk about that next week. But in the meantime, we have more content coming this week. We will have the show with Dan tomorrow night, which is here on this channel. I don't know what we're talking about yet because we never make that decision until the very last minute. So check that out whenever we'll be on at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So check that out tomorrow. And then in the morning, we have the Traveler Tuesday video, unboxing video on Thursday. And that is pretty much what's going on. So I would like to thank everybody for coming by tonight. We've had a great time. We've had a lot of good discussion. We have had a lot. I've learned a bunch of stuff. And hopefully this has been an educational and enriching experience for everybody. So thanks for coming by. We'll see you all next week.